Hello, I'm a chicken.
Hello, I'm Wolf.
And we're the founders of the Glacorian development team. If you're interested in knowing a little more about the both of us, please check out our first episode of the QNA series where we introduce ourselves and explore why we want to share the story of the Glacorian universe with everyone.
If you're not familiar with our setting, we gave a synopsis about it in the first episode as well, and this whole series is dedicated to shedding further light on it too.
Our first question for this month comes from Discord member Hatter Demad, and he asks, what is your favorite part of the world?
Fantastic question. I think for me, personally, the story has been something I've developed for a very long time. I mentioned this in the last episode. And there's certainly satisfaction in seeing how far it's come and just the sheer amount of content that's been created for the setting. It's gone from, an awful fan fiction of a 12-year-old to a fully fledged universe that has intricacies and characters spanning the full history of humanity all the way to the current point of the setting 2865.
I read some of that
and even
fan fiction, some of that older stuff you wrote.
I sent it to you, did I?
You sent some of it, not all of it.
Oh, goodness. But we've rewritten all of the content that was originally hashed out and up to the current point, 2865. Yep. And we've even got stuff for past that time as well.
Yep.
I think, though, that in terms of specific things that I enjoy from the world, it'd have to be the day-to-day life of a citizen of the shogunate. Yeah. Each of them have a certain level of self-determined security, and their surrounding environment supports that. Cities are built to be defensible and protect their occupants in every regard. Without there being an imposition of some state-enforced violence, they don't have to go to the police to solve all of their problems all the time. People are trained on how to protect themselves as well, with efficiency and with the right amount of respect to the tools used in doing so. As a citizen of a country that doesn't value the right to self-protect, I find comfort in being able to write about a society that does.
Yep.
That's not a broad sweeping statement of hyperbole either. Just to clarify, I have in fact read the criminal code or laws of my country. There's no emphasis on self-protection at all.
Yeah. The United States, so for those that don't know, Wolf is from Australia, and yep. I'm from the United States. And even in the United States, you can think of each of the 50 states as their own individual nations, and that's the foundation of the Union. It's a little different now. We're a little more centralized, but even now, not every state is created equal in terms of the right to self-defense and carrying certain tools such as firearms. And so not every state has like castle doctrine or stand your ground doctrine. And some states that do implement it have a populace that abuses that, or a legal system that abuses that for malicious reasons. And it's well, there's a bunch of problems for sure. But yeah, that's I would agree that writing about a society that on a species-wide level that has, for the most part, managed to... there's still problems, but has incorporated the right to self-defense almost as a species-wide right is definitely... That's something that perhaps an argument could be made that's never been done, never been experienced by humanity before.
Not since the invention of the state. I think that maybe cavemen had the right to self-protect because that was the only way they could protect
like a
themselves.
De facto at that level, at a de facto right to that. Certainly not as like agriculture grew and urbanization and all. It became less and less of a species wide.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I guess it's my turn to answer that question. So my favorite part is that the story is human-centric, with humanity as the solution rather than the problem. Yes, humanity has its issues, and it's nowhere near perfect, which is also shown in the setting. But the fact that the story doesn't consider humanity a problem to be resolved is my favorite part. So I'm human. So I don't enjoy human-hating stories. And yes, stories about how humanity creates problems and destroys environments and where only a few individual humans work against the collective of humanity to resolve those problems is human-hating. The movie 2012 comes to mind when I think of human-hating stories. While I do enjoy Star Trek, it is also a little human-hating as it assumes that humanity must fundamentally change such that the humans shown in the series are functionally not human anymore. In reality, I expect that if we did reach a point that humanity traveled between the stars, like is shown in Star Trek, then we wouldn't be much different than we are today, complete with our failures and quirks and everything that makes us human. The Glacorian universe treats humanity that way, and is a human-centric story that focuses on humanity as a solution to problems rather than a problem to be solved. This obviously appeals to me since I am human and love humans, which is also exactly what an alien spy would say too, but I'm not an alien spy, I swearses.
No, he's one of them, he's one of them!
My name is Zim. I'm a normal human boy. Have you seen
How
that
do you
series?
do, fellow
That's
humans? No, I haven't seen Invaders.
Oh, it's just fair warning. The creators of that anime, they have a thing with eating. Like they just hate eating. Like because every time they show it, it's just disgusting.
Interesting.
But it's my good.
You know, as a college student, my food's not very nice. I don't. You know, I got a thing with eating myself at the moment.
Oh man!
No, I'm getting my nutrients.
It's such a good anime.
I'm okay. Yeah.
So funny.
The second question for this month is from Discord member Duckaboo, and the rest of the questions for this month will also be from Duckaboo. And his first question is, so there is something I don't really get. Why and how exactly did the Kothorian War drag on for a century? I was under the impression it was humanity which was on the back foot technologically and resource-wise.
So, as mentioned, humanity wasn't really on the back foot technologically, and certainly not resource-wise. Kothorians were spread out, constantly fought each other over loot, and were only loosely united in gold, rather than as a species or nation. War chiefs paid a tribute to the war god of the First Creed only because the war god continued to fairly assign valuable targets to each individual war band to keep them loyal, and was more so a demonstration of a singularly powerful strategic mind cutting deals than a nation with any leaning of conformity or greater good. This can be seen as similar to the 18th century flying gang of the Caribbean, which the Pirates of the Caribbean movies are based on.
Humanity had, per capita, at the time of the Kothorian War in 2432, an astronomically greater resource and production output than any Kothorian world, and the average quote-unquote civilian had access to much better military technology than the average Kothorian soldier.
As such, while every human was outnumbered by Kothorians nearly 3-1, these humans were effectively porcupines to their lion predators. For reference, lions rarely attack porcupines because even though they can kill them, the lion gets so badly injured that it might not be able to take on another fight for its next meal and die as a result.
Fighting over established human planets was a long and difficult slog. The same for human fleets. Kothorians tended to have an attitude that fighting was done by throwing as much mass at the enemy as they could to kill things quickly, while humans were more balanced, and during Strategos Jade Rosick's tenure, retooled to becoming more defensive to minimize the effectiveness of Kothorian strategy.
So, the 100-year Kothorian War was effectively a battle of Kothorians swinging a giant sledgehammer at fleets and soldiers, and humanity taking a 2-foot step back to not get hit, thereby causing the Kothorians to waste a lot of energy for very little gain. Humanity did lose several planets over time, but it was an enormous expenditure for the enemy.
Eventually, the Kothorians realized that their actions were costing a lot of resources, and warbands refused to throw their remaining forces into a battle whose victory would actually cripple them, and this meant that their operations were even further slowed down. During the first 30 years of the war, before languages had even been translated, Kothorian infantry were reporting to their commanders just how advanced humans were on an individual level, with no small amount of surprise and frustration.
We actually have a short story we want to write about that. which
we do, and we're looking at making that into a short film even.
Yeah, that'd be great if we could do that. I believe the setting was going to be some of the after effects of Jade Rosick's successful defense against
yes,
that helped propel her to becoming head strategos.
Yes.
So it should also be noted that the Kothorian style of warfare and the human style of warfare were dramatically different, and neither of them were currently tooled towards state-on-state warfare. The Unification War and Glacorian Insurrection, which had racked humanity for nearly 200 years prior to the Kothorian War, meant that humanity was tooled towards brother-against-brother civil war type warfare. Kothorians, on the other hand, despite having gone to war with the state of the Gamolan Convocation, were tooled towards pirate raiding, with the addition of leaving nothing behind. Lots of infighting and lots of internal competition on the Kothorian side meant that they were also ill-suited for fighting the Glacorian shogunate state at the time of the Kothorian War.
It's really important to note that human history, we think of wars when we think of wars, we think of World War One and World War Two, where it's massive scale state-on-state warfare. People are bombing the crap out of each other's cities, and there's artillery everywhere, and people are screaming and dying and that kind of stuff. That still happens in civil wars. But the function of not only the command, but the motive is completely different. It can be seen that in World War Two, when the leaders of certain countries died, a lot of the soldiers gave up. Not all of them did, but a lot of them did, and simply surrendered or defected. But in wars like Vietnam, where it's guerrilla fighting, which a civil war would also have a lot of guerrilla style fighting, people are personally motivated because whether they win or lose genuinely means their family dies. And so it would be a lot more drawn out and difficult, like in Vietnam and Afghanistan. Duckaboo also asks, were human claimed systems widespread and extensive back then, or were the Kothorians a lot smaller than what I am thinking of them as? Would the travel distance between these widespread colonies contribute at all to the time span of the war?
So, outside of Earth, the Glacorian shogunate had 19 systems with habitable planets in them at the time of the Kothorian War in 2432. But they had established mining stations and research outposts in hundreds of systems. Apart from the newly established Outer Rim colonies, which was about 8 of them, they were all industrialized, thriving, and extremely well defended. In total, the shogunate completely lost 7 habitable planets during the war and a huge number of outposts, but plenty of other planets were raided or battled over without being completely destroyed by Kothorians. The Kothorians themselves would have had anywhere up to 32 systems with habitable planets, but as said previously, they weren't necessarily unified and would have been far less industrial than the well-established human planets.
So, yes, travel distance would have played a large role, since the Kothorian FTL drives would have been somewhat riskier to use, and would have either been used with care, or there would have been accidents that caused sections of a warband's fleet to be lost, and then the operation called off to recover from that loss. Likewise, even just the time it took to raid a station or to battle on a planet would have tied up a warband's capability to engage elsewhere. For example, Strategos Pascal Guerra was born on a planet in a star system named TZ Arietis. That's a real star system. We've mapped them all out. He was born on a planet called Farbe, which was conquered by Kothorians in 2481. His parents and several siblings were killed or enslaved during that event, but he eventually escaped and later became the leader of the shogunate. This invasion took years to complete, and he lived in fear, hiding from raiding parties and working with resistance fighters every step of the way to simply survive. During that time, he was able to take the knowledge he gathered from the traumatic experience that would have been, and proved to be the effective strategist needed to finally put an end to the Kothorian War during his tenure between 2501 and 2545.
Our next question, and we swear Duckaboo's not holding us hostage to answer all of his questions, is were WMDs like nukes widely used during the Kothorian War?
So, yes, in fact, a new human frontier colony, which at the time it was new, was bombarded with nuclear warheads by the Kothorians into a planet-wide wasteland during a significant human guerrilla resistance. Today, the planet has been recolonized by humanity and is a thriving core world.
Nuclear weapons were not, however, used to fight every battle. An important thing to consider is that, from the Kothorian perspective, if all of the valuable assets are nuked, there's nothing worth stealing left behind. This would also have contributed to the time it took to capture a planet.
Yep, it takes a lot of time to go house to house, street to street.
Yep.
Long time. I think the Battle of Stalingrad took, was it 100 days? Something like that?
Yeah.
Over one city.
Man, yeah.
The next question is, if the overall period of the whole Kothorian War was to be split up into specific phases, such as quote-unquote initial raids, stalemate, or first assault, how many years would you assign to each? Within these periods, were there time sinks, like temporary truces, wax and wanes of scale of conflict, which were counted to the war but are not one of the big pushes and assaults?
So the quote-unquote phases of the Kothorian War are roughly outlined in one of the documents shared openly with all of our Patreon subscribers, free and paid, regardless of whether you're free or paid tier, called the Abridged Timeline of Humanity. Starting off, we have the initial period managed by Strategos Gallus Cincius, who was a scientist before becoming a member of the Strategos. He was forced to declare a state of emergency and then war in 2432, when first contact with the Kothorians was hostile. Gallus Cincius retired in 2436 and was replaced by Werner Locke. Werner Locke's tenure as Strategos would still fall into this general phase of being the initial period, as the methods he tried to use to counter the Kothorian threat were inefficient. As we answered earlier, what is effectively human Civil War tactics weren't going to cut it against an external threat, let alone one whose true scale had not yet been discovered. Werner was voted out of the Strategos in 2450.
We would say, however, that the second phase of the Kothorian War started in around 2445, before Werner was voted out, and we've dubbed that the Slaughter of Humanity. That's the phase. This period is a mixture of both discovering exactly how large of a threat the Kothorian warbands were, and also when humanity was on the back foot. Strategos Jade Rosek, who replaced Werner Locke in 2450, did her best to put humanity on an all-or-nothing defensive stance, to a point where people would have been strapping FTL devices and pistols onto what were effectively space buses and ramming them into Kothorian warships just to slow down the advance.
This Slaughter of Humanity phase lasted 62 years, until the year 2512, by which time Strategos Pascal Guerra had been voted to replace Jade after her death. Pascal Guerra took a risky gamble in 2512, which ended the Slaughter of Humanity. He ordered all remaining military forces and military-capable civilians to begin an advance, Blitzkrieg style, towards a recently discovered Kothorian world filled with what were apparently Kothorian civilians. Up until that point, the only Kothorian territory that had been mapped were pirate outposts, strongholds, and colonies that would have offered no strategic victory if they were captured, let alone the costs of diverting fleets to try and capture them.
This last phase we don't officially have a name for, but we can dub it Pascal's Gamble. This section of the war lasts for only 20 years and ends in 2532 with the victory of humanity as Pascal's Gamble pays off. Humanity lands forces on the discovered Kothorian civilian world, but are immediately met with unilateral surrender. The war god of the first creed of the Kothorian warbands is executed on live broadcast along with his family, and the Kothorians fully surrendered to the Glacorian shogunate. That was a massive shock to not only the soldiers that landed, but also the humans who received the broadcast, to see the Kothorians executing the war god and his family. But that is the Kothorian way of submitting, surrender, to confess that you are the predator of us.
Yeah. I remember reading in, I think it was the abridged timeline, that the Kothorians literally had no way to conceive of surrender outside of self-destruction, outside of, okay, well, they killed us and now they eat us, kind of thing. And so this was the defeat at the hands of humanity. Was like the first time they had to deal with the concept of surrendering without dying.
Yes,
which,
and so it led to a very difficult 200 years of integration.
Yes. Which, honestly, perhaps this is an idea for when we write stories about it, but perhaps the entire reason they even thought of the idea of being able to surrender without dying is because of the Xeno studies that they had over the 100-year war of humanity, as they learn more about humanity just from having human slaves, for example.
Realizing that they're not animals.
That they're very complex, and in some ways more complex than Kothorians, and they had the notion of you can surrender and be defeated and still live, and it's like, so, wait, how do we process that as Kothorians?
So, adding on to that, compounding on the fact that surrender as a concept didn't really exist in their culture, is that when I've worked through some of the linguistics that they have, I've not fully fleshed out their language, but in terms of the conceptualization of the words that they have, a lot of words that we have for them would harken back to death. So they don't have invincible or strong. Yes. Instead of saying strong, they say killer. Mm-hmm. Or hard. Instead of saying, I guess if you look at the root word of immortal, mort means to refer to death. Immortal means undying. But things like invincible, the word for that is not dying, basically. As a very raw root language product for them.
Another thing I think of whenever I think of the war god's entire family being executed is, part of me, and sucks to be a slave in that family, part of me expects that the slaves would have been executed too, and maybe the human slaves would have been spared just because it was a human species, it was humanity conquering them, but I'm not entirely sure if that would happen.
I'm also not sure, because they would see their slaves as property.
Yes, and part of the family, of like the slaves would have shared in the fate of the family,
especially if any of them were concubines. Absolutely, yeah.
Which I'm sure that would have, if human slaves were executed along with that family, I'm sure that would have gone a long way towards. I bet even over after a couple hundred years of attempting to integrate, that would cause still be a bit of a sore spot as far as racial tensions.
Absolutely. In fact, it's noted in the abridged timeline of humanity that the war didn't immediately end after the surrender. There were still a few fleets here and there that fought on, or resistance groups that kicked up a bit of a stink. But I think that there was about 2 or 3 years after that surrender before the war was officially declared over. And so the first fleets who saw that surrender, first and foremost, they didn't actually understand it was a surrender. They just thought it was that single planet that had cooed the warbands, and then they went to they ended up mapping the entire Kothorian space, all of the systems, and then they found their capital and landed on the capital and found out that it was in fact the surrender. The Kothorians had completely gone, well, mostly silent.
Yeah. So, our last question for this month is, in a universe where humanity faces apocalyptic threats, where do the Glacorian shogunate's clans fit in?
So that's a good question. I think that in the face of Kothorians, that's a very clear existential threat to humanity at the time of the war. And something that we haven't mentioned so far in the podcast series is that there's currently criminal underworld groups called the clans, and so that are kicking up quite a bit of unrest and civil, there's civil wars going on some of the planets. So where do they fit in? It's a great question. There are a few answers. Depending on the clan, they could be considered akin to a modern state or union, or even a criminal element like an organized crime family operating within a state. They each have their own objectives, at least some of which are mutually exclusive with the other states and crime families operating within an area. So I think there's about 13 or 14 of them.
Yep.
Major ones. In the face of a mutual external threat, such as the ORES, and we'll get to that in a later episode of the podcast, generally speaking, all the different states and crime families would work together towards mutual defense. The operations of organized crime in Chicago during World War II, known as Operation Underworld, is an example of something like that. Yep. In addition to this, the clans likely represent the most significant apocalyptic threat to humanity in all of their history. As an internal and destabilizing threat, they could leave humanity vulnerable to ill-timed external threats.
Yep. So those were some of the questions that have been sent to us through our Discord server. A link to the Glacorian Development Discord server is in the description of this video. If you want to come check us out or get involved in the community, it's open to everyone. In addition, we will include a link to our Patreon for those interested in supporting our efforts.
If you have any questions, or simply want to follow our progress as we develop media for this universe, please join us on Discord. If you want to support our efforts and can afford it, consider our Patreon. Thank you for listening.